Alright, let's be real for a second. In the K-pop industry, bodyguards are everywhere. They're the tall, serious-looking guys in black suits standing behind your favorite idols, scanning the crowd, blocking sasaengs, and making sure chaos doesn't swallow the people they're paid to protect. Most fans barely notice them. Most idols treat them as part of the background, professional, functional, invisible. But what happens when an idol suddenly stops in the middle of a chaotic airport, turns around, and makes sure their bodyguard has eaten? What happens when a member publicly calls their security team Hyung with the same warmth they'd use for an older brother? What happens when the line between hired protection and chosen family gets so blurred that even fans start crying over a bodyguard moment? Well, that's exactly what Stray Kids does. These 8 guys have built a reputation that goes way beyond music and performance. They treat the people around them, staff, managers, stylists, and yes, bodyguards, like they genuinely matter. But which moment hit the hardest? Which member made the entire internet collectively lose it over a simple gesture toward a security guard? Was it the one who shared his umbrella in the pouring rain? Or the one who turned an awkward airport moment into something that still gets millions of views years later? Buckle up, because we're counting down the 7 most heartwarming, jaw-dropping, and genuinely emotional moments when Stray Kids members treated their bodyguards not as employees, but as family. And trust me, number 1 is going to wreck you. Let's go. Number 8. Changbin. The tough rapper who carried his bodyguard's bag without being asked. Picture this. A packed international airport, cameras everywhere, fans pressing against every barrier, and Changbin walking through the terminal looking like he just stepped off the set of an action movie. Black cap, black jacket, jaw set, built like someone who could genuinely hold his own in a fight, and everyone around him knows it. Of all the Stray Kids members, Changbin is the one whose physical presence alone commands a certain kind of respect. He's compact but powerful, the kind of frame that comes from years of disciplined training mixed with a natural athleticism that shows in how he moves, grounded, deliberate, like every step has weight behind it. And when you pair that physicality with his stage persona, the aggressive delivery, the rapid-fire rap verses, the way he grips a microphone like he's about to interrogate it, it's easy to build a mental image of Changbin as the tough guy. The hard exterior. The one who doesn't do soft. Fan compilations of his intense stage expressions rack up millions of views specifically because people love the contrast between his everyday goofiness and the on-stage beast mode that turns him into someone entirely different under the lights. But here's what people consistently underestimate about Changbin, and it's the same thing his own members have pointed out repeatedly in interviews, behind-the-scenes content. And those unguarded late-night conversations that reveal more than any scripted answer ever could. Changbin's toughness isn't armor. It's a container. It holds everything he feels, and Changbin feels enormously. He cries at emotional movies. He writes lyrics about vulnerability, loneliness, and the weight of trying to be strong for other people. He's the member who has openly talked about imposter syndrome, about feeling like he needs to prove himself every single day, about the fear that one day he'll wake up and the talent won't be there anymore. That emotional depth, hidden underneath the rapper exterior, is what makes the moment we're about to discuss so revealing, because it shows what happens when a person who the world sees as tough chooses to be tender, and does it so casually that he clearly doesn't even register it as remarkable. The setting was a late-night airport arrival after a long international flight, the kind of arrival where everyone's running on fumes. Red-eye flights within Asia are brutal enough for passengers traveling in business class with nothing to carry. Now imagine doing it as part of a K-pop touring operation, where the members have carry-on luggage, personal bags, gift bags from events, and sometimes additional items that accumulated during the schedule. Now imagine being the bodyguard in that equation, responsible not only for your own gear, but frequently carrying extra bags for the group, because the logistics of moving 8 idols plus staff through an airport often means that bags get distributed among whoever has free hands. And the bodyguards almost always end up with the heaviest load, because that's what everyone expects. Nobody tells the bodyguard to carry extra bags. It just happens. The way dishes pile up in a shared kitchen and somehow always get done by the same person, there's an unspoken gravitational pull that directs the extra weight toward the person least likely to complain about it. On this particular arrival, fan cams from fans waiting at the airport captured the full sequence of events. The members emerged from the arrivals gate in a loose formation, moving through the terminal with their security detail. Most of the members were carrying a single personal bag, a backpack, or a small crossbody, while the bodyguards were visibly weighed down. Multiple bags per person. Straps over both shoulders. Hands full. The bodyguard walking near Changbin was particularly loaded. Fans who examined the footage counted at least 3 separate bags on this one man, plus what appeared to be a large paper shopping bag hooked on his forearm. The kind that digs into your skin and leaves red marks if you carry it long enough. And this is where the moment happens, and why it matters far beyond the surface-level reading of idol helps carry a bag. Changbin, without breaking stride, without making eye contact, without any verbal exchange, reached over and took the heaviest bag off the bodyguard's shoulder. Not the small one. Not the easy one. The big one. The one that was clearly pulling the guard's posture to one side and making his walk uneven. Changbin slung it over his own shoulder like it was nothing and kept walking. No announcement. No pause. No, let me help you with that. Just a seamless, wordless transfer of weight from someone who was carrying too much to someone who decided, entirely on his own, that the distribution wasn't fair and he was going to fix it. What makes this moment uniquely Changbin and distinct from every other entry on this list is the nature of the act itself. This wasn't emotional. It wasn't sentimental. It wasn't the kind of moment that makes you cry or that lends itself to soft piano music and fan edits. This was physical, practical, functional. Changbin didn't offer words of comfort. He didn't share a snack or an umbrella. He looked at a man carrying too much weight and literally took some of it onto his own body. And there's something deeply meaningful about that kind of help, the kind that doesn't perform care but practices it. The kind that says, I'm not going to tell you I appreciate your hard work. I'm going to reduce your hard work. Right now. With my hands. It's the love language of people who grew up understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone isn't to tell them you see their burden, it's to walk over and carry part of it. The bodyguard's reaction was subtle, but unmistakable if you know what to look for. There was a brief moment of surprise, a slight turn of the head, a micro-expression that flickered between "you don't have to do that" and "thank you for doing that," followed by something that fans described as a barely visible nod. An acknowledgement between two men who communicate in actions rather than words. No dramatic exchange. No tears. Just the quiet, masculine shorthand of "I got you" answered by "I know." And that's the Changbin that rarely makes it into the highlight reels. The one who doesn't perform kindness for cameras because his version of kindness doesn't photograph well. It's too practical, too unglamorous, too rooted in the simple physics of seeing someone weighed down and choosing to lighten the load. It doesn't make people cry. It makes people think. It makes you reconsider every time you walked past someone struggling with heavy bags and didn't stop. It makes you wonder how many people around you are carrying weight, literal and metaphorical, that you could share if you just paid attention the way Changbin pays attention. The fan community's response to this moment was fascinatingly different from the responses to more overtly emotional idol staff interactions. Instead of tearful comments, the dominant reaction was respect. Raw, straightforward respect. Comments like, "That's a real man right there," and "Changbin doesn't talk about kindness. He just does it," and "the way he didn't even hesitate, that's not learned behavior, that's character." And they're right. That kind of reflex, the instinct to redistribute weight without being asked, without hesitation, without expecting acknowledgement, doesn't come from media training or fan service strategy sessions. It comes from a fundamental orientation toward fairness. From the belief, buried deep enough that it operates below conscious thought, that if someone next to you is struggling and you have the capacity to help, then not helping isn't an option. That's Changbin. The rapper who hits hard on stage and carries bags in airports. The tough exterior with the tenderest instincts. The man who proves, every time nobody's watching, that real strength isn't about how much you can carry for yourself, it's about how much you're willing to carry for someone else. But if you think a practical act of physical help is as far as this list goes, you're underestimating what's still ahead, because the member at number 7 didn't carry a bag or say a single word. And yet what he did in one silent 2-second gesture changed how the entire internet sees him forever. Number 7. Lino. The cold-looking cat who secretly guards his own guardian. You know what's funny about Lee Miho? The internet has spent years building this narrative around him, the savage member, the unbothered cat, the guy who roasts his own members without blinking and walks away like nothing happened. Variety shows love to clip his savage moments. Fan edits love to paint him as this ice-cold, emotionally detached prince who only shows affection to his 3 cats back home. And sure, if you only watch the surface-level content, you'd buy that image completely. But here's the thing that fans who've followed Stray Kids closely since their pre-debut survival show already know. Lino is quietly, almost secretly, one of the most observant and caring members in the entire group. He doesn't announce his kindness. He doesn't perform it for cameras. He just does it, and if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it entirely. And that's exactly what makes this moment so powerful, because it wasn't meant to be seen. It wasn't a fan service moment. It wasn't staged. It was caught purely by accident, and when it surfaced online, it shifted the entire conversation about who Lino really is behind closed doors. Let's set the scene. It was during one of Stray Kids' packed overseas schedules, where talking back-to-back concert dates, fan meetings, variety show recordings, and airport transfers that blur into one exhausting loop of suitcases, flashing cameras, and screaming crowds. If you've ever watched fan cams of K-pop idols navigating international airports, you know how intense it gets. Fans lined up behind barriers, cameras flashing non-stop, people shouting names. Security trying to carve a path through a sea of bodies while the idols walk through looking like they just stepped out of a fashion editorial despite having slept maybe 3 hours on a red-eye flight. It's controlled chaos at best and genuinely dangerous at worst. During one of these airport arrivals, the crowd was particularly dense. Fan cams from multiple angles showed the scene, fans pressing against barriers, airport staff trying to maintain order, and the Stray Kids members walking in a tight formation surrounded by their security team. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most idols in this situation have one priority: get from point A to point B without incident. Keep your head down, maybe wave to fans, follow your security, and get in the van. That's the protocol. That's what you're trained to do. But Lino, mid-walk through this wall of noise and chaos, did something that most people initially missed in the raw fancam footage. He turned his head, not toward the fans, not toward the cameras, but toward his bodyguard walking beside him. The bodyguard was carrying multiple bags, clearly weighed down, while simultaneously trying to create space for Lino to walk through. And without saying a word, without making any dramatic gesture, Lino quietly reached over and adjusted the bag strap that was slipping off his bodyguard's shoulder. Just fixed it. Casually. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he wasn't an idol worth millions surrounded by thousands of screaming fans, but just a guy noticing that someone next to him was struggling and deciding to help. The gesture took maybe 2 seconds. The bodyguard glanced at him, visibly surprised, and Lino just gave this tiny nod, almost imperceptible, and kept walking. No words exchanged. No dramatic pause. Just a quiet, instinctive act of consideration that said more about his character than any interview answer ever could. When fans isolated that moment from the fancam and posted it online, it went viral within hours. The comments section exploded. People were writing full paragraphs about how that 2-second gesture completely dismantled the cold Lino narrative. Because here's what that moment actually revealed: Lino doesn't just tolerate the people working around him. He watches them. He notices the small things. The slipping bag strap. The tired eyes. The weight someone else is carrying, literally and figuratively. That's not something you fake. That's not something you do for clout or fan approval. That's a behavioral pattern that comes from genuine empathy, the kind that operates quietly in the background without ever asking for recognition. And what makes this even more meaningful is the context of who Lino was before Stray Kids. Before he became an idol, before the stages and the world tours and the millions of fans, Lee Miho was a backup dancer. He worked behind the scenes, carrying equipment, showing up early, staying late, doing the unglamorous work that nobody films or celebrates. He knows what it feels like to be the person in the background. He knows what it feels like to carry the heavy bags while someone else walks in the spotlight. So when he reached over and fixed that bodyguard strap, it wasn't just kindness, it was recognition. It was one worker seeing another worker and saying, without words, I see you. I know what you're carrying. And I'm not going to pretend I don't. That's the Lino that doesn't make it into the Savage compilations. That's the Lino that his members talk about when they say he's the one who quietly takes care of everyone without ever taking credit. The internet might call him a cat, but cats notice everything, they just choose when to show it. And in that airport, for 2 seconds, Lino showed it in the most human, unscripted, beautifully understated way possible. But if you think a silent gesture in an airport is the peak of how Stray Kids treats their bodyguards, you're not even close to ready for what's coming next, because the member at number 6 didn't just notice his bodyguard. He turned an entire public moment into something that still makes fans tear up to this day. Number 6. Hyunjin. The artist who painted gratitude without a canvas. Most people know Hwang Hyunjin as the face that stops you mid-scroll. The visuals, the stage presence, the way he moves through choreography like his body is having a private conversation with the music, all of that is well documented, celebrated, and replayed millions of times across every platform imaginable. But there's a side of Hyunjin that doesn't trend as often, a side that has nothing to do with his jawline or his dance breaks or his paint-stained fingers in aesthetic Instagram posts. It's the side that shows up when no performance is required. When the lights aren't pointed at him. When the only audience is someone wearing a black suit and an earpiece, someone whose entire job is to be invisible so Hyunjin can be visible. And what Hyunjin did during one specific overseas schedule didn't just break the internet for a few hours, it fundamentally changed how fans understand the emotional intelligence of this man who's often reduced to nothing more than a pretty face. Here's the setup, and pay attention to the details because they matter. Stray Kids was in the middle of one of their world tour legs, the Maniac Tour, which by all accounts was one of the most physically and emotionally demanding stretches of their career. We're talking stadium-level venues, sold-out arenas across multiple continents, time zones shifting every few days, and a performance set list that ran well over 2 hours of high-energy choreography, live vocals, and fan interaction. The members themselves have talked openly about how exhausting these tours get. Han has mentioned anxiety. Bang Chan has talked about sleepless nights preparing set lists, and Felix has described moments of pure physical depletion backstage. But here's what rarely gets discussed: the staff goes through all of that too. The bodyguards, the managers, the crew, they fly the same flights, endure the same jet lag, navigate the same chaotic airports, and do it all while remaining alert, professional, and physically ready to respond to any situation. They don't get the adrenaline boost of performing in front of 20,000 screaming fans. They don't get the fan letters, the chants of their name, the emotional payoff of standing on stage and feeling loved by thousands. They just work. Quietly. Relentlessly. And most of the time, thanklessly. So when Stray Kids landed at an airport after a particularly grueling stretch of back-to-back shows, multiple cities in just a few days, minimal rest, maximum chaos, the energy was visibly low. Fancams from that arrival show the members walking slower than usual, some with masks pulled up, hats low, the universal body language of, please let me get to the van without incident. But Hyunjin, despite clearly being exhausted himself, you could see it in his posture, in the way he carried himself differently from his usual confident stride, did something that stopped fans in their tracks when they reviewed the footage later. As the group was moving through the arrival area, one of the bodyguards stumbled slightly. Not a dramatic fall, not a scene, just a small misstep, the kind that happens when you've been on your feet for 18 hours straight and your body quietly reminds you that you're human. Nobody else seemed to notice. The other members kept walking. The other security personnel kept their positions. Airport staff kept directing. But Hyunjin noticed. He immediately reached out and steadied the bodyguard's arm, not with the awkward hesitation of someone crossing a professional boundary, but with the instinctive reflex of someone who genuinely cares about the person next to him. And then he did something that elevated this from a nice moment to a genuinely emotional one. He didn't just stabilize the guard and move on. He leaned in closer and said something directly to him. Fans who analyzed the phantom footage, including those skilled at lip-reading Korean, pieced together that Hyunjin asked him if he was okay. And then, according to multiple fan accounts from people who were close enough to hear, followed it up by telling the bodyguard that he'd been working too hard and needed to rest when they got to the hotel. Let that sink in for a moment. An idol, mid-airport walk, surrounded by flashing cameras and screaming fans, took a personal moment to not only physically support his bodyguard, but to verbally acknowledge that the bodyguard was overworking himself. That's not politeness. That's not idol training. No company workshop teaches you to check on your security team's fatigue levels in the middle of a public appearance. That comes from somewhere deeper, from an emotional awareness that Hyunjin has demonstrated repeatedly throughout his career, but rarely gets credited for in the way it deserves. And this is where the background becomes crucial to understanding why this moment hits differently with Hyunjin specifically. Hwang Hyunjin has been open about his own struggles with emotional processing. He's cried on camera more times than most idols would ever allow themselves to, not because he's fragile, but because he refuses to perform emotional detachment as a form of strength. He's talked about how deeply he feels things: the pressure, the love, the exhaustion, the gratitude, and how he's learned that acknowledging those feelings in others is one of the most important things you can do as a human being. So when he reached out to that stumbling bodyguard, it wasn't a random act of niceness. It was Hyunjin applying his own emotional philosophy in real time. He recognized exhaustion in someone else because he intimately knows what exhaustion looks like from the inside. He didn't look away because he's built a personal ethic around not looking away, around not pretending that the people who protect him are machines without limits. The fan community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Edited clips of the moment racked up millions of views. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own stories of being in service roles, bodyguards, assistants, drivers, catering staff, and how rare it is for the person you're serving to turn around and serve you back, even if it's just with a question and a steady hand. One comment that went viral in its own right read, "He didn't just catch a falling bodyguard. He caught every person who's ever been told their exhaustion doesn't matter because they're not the one in the spotlight." That's the weight of what Hyunjin did in those few seconds. He didn't need a canvas, he didn't need paint, he didn't need a stage. He turned a stumble in an airport into a brushstroke of genuine human connection that resonated with millions of people who've ever felt invisible in their own labor. That's artistry beyond choreography. That's the Hyunjin that deserves to trend. But hold that emotion tight, because the member waiting at number 5 didn't just check on a bodyguard during a moment of weakness. This one deliberately created a moment of joy for his security team that nobody saw coming. And it was caught in the most unexpected way possible. Number 5. Felix. The sunshine who made a bodyguard smile for the first time on camera. There's a reason the internet collectively decided that Felix is made of actual sunlight. It's not just the freckles scattered across his face like someone flicked a paintbrush of gold at him. It's not just the voice, that impossibly deep, resonant bass that comes out of a face so soft it could sell skincare without trying. And it's not just the way he tells every single person within earshot, "I love you," like he's distributing emotional vitamins free of charge. No. The reason Felix earned the title of Stray Kid Sunshine, the reason that word follows him across every language, every platform, every continent they've ever toured, is because his warmth isn't selective. It doesn't have a VIP list. It doesn't check your job title before deciding whether you deserve it. Felix radiates toward everyone equally: fans, members, staff, strangers at convenience stores, and yes, the bodyguards who spend their days being professionally stoic within arm's reach of one of the most genuinely affectionate human beings the K-pop industry has ever produced. And that indiscriminate warmth is exactly what led to a moment so pure, so unexpectedly disarming, that it turned a man whose literal job description includes maintain expressionless composure at all times into someone who couldn't help but crack the widest, most unguarded smile ever captured on a fan cam. Here's the full picture. Stray Kids had a fan sign event, one of those intimate, high-energy sessions where fans line up, sit across from each member one by one, exchange a few precious seconds of conversation, get an album signed, and carry that memory like a personal treasure for years. Fan signs are chaotic in their own beautiful way. There's laughing, there's crying, there are fans pulling out elaborate gifs and memes, members reacting with everything from genuine shock to theatrical horror, and, through it all, the bodyguards stand at their posts along the perimeter, scanning the room, watching the crowd, existing in that strange professional limbo where you're physically present in a space overflowing with joy but emotionally required to remain detached from it. It's a weird position when you think about it, standing guard in a room full of happiness, watching people experience the best moment of their month or even their year, while your face has to stay neutral and your eyes have to stay sharp. You're surrounded by celebration, but you're not part of it. You're close to the warmth, but you're not supposed to feel it. Except Felix doesn't operate by those rules. Felix operates by the rule of, if you're in my radius, you're getting loved, and I don't care what your job title says. Multiple fan accounts from that event, and we're talking detailed accounts from fans who were seated at angles where they could see both the signing table and the security perimeter, describe what happened during a brief lull between fan interactions. Felix had just finished signing for one fan and was waiting for the next person to sit down. Most members use those gaps to sip water, stretch their hands, or whisper something to the member next to them. Felix used that gap to do something entirely different. He turned around in his chair, fully turned, not a glance, not a half look, and faced the bodyguard standing directly behind him. And then, with the same energy and enthusiasm he uses when greeting fans he's meeting for the first time, Felix held up a small snack. Reports vary between a piece of chocolate and a rice cake from the fan gift pile, and offered it to the bodyguard with both hands, the way you'd offer something to a respected elder or a close friend. Both hands. That detail matters. In Korean culture, offering something with both hands isn't just polite, it's a gesture loaded with respect and sincerity. It says, I'm not doing this casually. I'm doing this because I see you as someone worthy of my full attention and regard. For a young idol to extend that level of cultural respect to a bodyguard, someone who, in the rigid hierarchy of Korean professional settings, occupies a very different social tier, that's not just nice. That's a deliberate choice to dismantle the invisible wall that industry norms build between talent and staff. The bodyguard's reaction is what sent the internet into a collective meltdown. For a split second, you could see the professional mask crack. The composure, the trained neutrality, the I am a wall of human protection and I do not have feelings during work hours facade, all of it buckled under the sheer force of Felix holding out a snack with both hands and what fans described as the most earnest, expectant, please take this, young, expression humanly possible. The bodyguard smiled. Not a polite, corporate, barely there smile. A real smile. The kind that reaches your eyes and softens your entire face and makes you look, for just a moment, like you forgot you were at work and remembered you were a person. He took the snack. He nodded. And Felix, visibly satisfied, like he'd just accomplished the most important mission of his day, turned back around to greet the next fan, completely unaware that multiple cameras had just captured a moment that would be replayed, screenshotted, edited, and shared across every Stray Kids fan community on the planet within hours. The clips spread like wildfire. Fan editors set it to emotional music. Translation accounts added context about the two-handed offering and its cultural significance. People who had never heard of Stray Kids were sharing the clip with captions like, "This is what genuine human decency looks like," and "Protect this man at all costs." But what elevated this beyond a viral cute moment was the deeper conversation it sparked about the emotional labor of bodyguards in the K-pop industry. Security personnel at fan events, airports, concerts, and public appearances operate under enormous pressure. They're responsible for the physical safety of some of the most high-profile individuals in Asian entertainment, often in environments that are unpredictable, emotionally charged, and logistically nightmarish. They work long hours, maintain constant vigilance, and do it all while being expected to be functionally invisible. Nobody thanks the bodyguard. Nobody offers the bodyguard a snack. Nobody turns around in their chair and treats the bodyguard like a human being who might be hungry, who might be tired, who might appreciate being acknowledged even once during a 6-hour event where everyone else in the room is being showered with love and attention. Felix did. And he did it with both hands, with eye contact, with a smile that said, "You matter to me, and I'm not going to let you stand behind me for hours without knowing that." That's the Felix effect. That's why the sunshine metaphor works so perfectly, because sunlight doesn't choose what it touches. It doesn't skip the bodyguard and only warm the fans. It lands on everything equally, and everything it touches grows a little brighter. Felix looked at a room where one person was systematically excluded from the joy happening all around him, and he decided, instinctively, naturally, without calculation, that exclusion wasn't going to happen on his watch. One snack. 2 hands. One real smile from a man who probably hadn't smiled on the job in months. That's all it took to remind the internet that kindness isn't about grand gestures. It's about noticing who hasn't been noticed. Now, if a snack and a smile at a fan sign event moved you, brace yourself, because the member at number 4 took things to an entirely different level during a live broadcast, and what he said about his bodyguard on camera left the entire chat speechless. Number 4. Bang Chan, the leader who called his bodyguard family on a live broadcast. If there's one thing the K-pop industry has taught us over the past 2 decades, it's that leadership in a group isn't just about who sings the opening line or whose name appears first in the credits. Real leadership, the kind that lasts, the kind that holds a group together through scandals, exhaustion, creative disagreements, and the slow grind of years spent under public scrutiny, shows up in the moments nobody scripts. It shows up in how you treat the people who can't do anything for your career. And if that's the metric, then Christopher Bang, known to the world as Bang Chan, leader of Stray Kids, has been passing that test since before most people even knew what Stray Kids was. Chan's relationship with leadership has never been performative. He didn't inherit the role because he was the oldest or the most marketable. He earned it through years of trainee life at JYP Entertainment, nearly 7 years of training, of watching debut opportunities pass him by, of being told he wasn't ready yet while peers debuted and found success around him. That kind of extended training period either breaks a person or forges them into someone with an almost unnatural capacity for patience, empathy, and awareness of the people around them. Chan came out of those 7 years as the latter. And nowhere is that forged empathy more visible than in the way he talks about the people who work behind the scenes of Stray Kids' operation, specifically. What he said during one particular episode of Chan's Room that turned a casual late-night livestream into one of the most emotionally resonant moments in the history of his broadcast series. For those unfamiliar, Chan's Room is a recurring V-Live, later moved to other platforms, where Bang Chan goes live late at night, usually alone, plays music, talks to fans in the chat, and just exists in this rare, unfiltered space between idol and human. It's arguably the most intimate recurring content any fourth-generation K-pop idol produces. There's no script, no manager whispering in his ear, no PD directing the conversation. It's just Chan, a pair of headphones, a playlist, and whatever's on his mind. And on this particular night, what was on his mind was gratitude, but not the kind of gratitude that idols typically express. He wasn't thanking fans for streaming numbers. He wasn't acknowledging award show wins. He started talking, almost out of nowhere, about the people who physically protect Stray Kids during their schedules. The Bodyguards. He brought them up casually at first, mentioning how they'd just come back from an overseas schedule that was particularly intense. But then his tone shifted. It got quieter. More deliberate. The chat, which is usually a rapid-fire scroll of emojis and "I love you, Chan" messages, started to slow down as people realized he was going somewhere real with this. Chan began describing specific things their bodyguards do that the public never sees. How they arrive hours before the members due to scout locations. how they coordinate with local security teams in foreign countries where they don't speak the language. How one bodyguard in particular always carries extra water bottles, not for himself, but for the members, because he noticed that they sometimes forget to hydrate between events, and he took it upon himself, without being asked, to just quietly make sure water was always within reach. Chan's voice wavered slightly when he talked about that detail. And anyone who's watched enough Chan's Room episodes knows that when his voice does that, when the Australian accented Korean gets a little rougher around the edges, he's fighting something emotional that he's not sure he wants to fully release on camera. But then he said it. The line that fans clipped, translated into 40+ languages, and spread across every social media platform within hours. He said, and this is translated from Korean, with multiple fan translators confirming the nuance. People call them our bodyguards, but I don't really see them that way. They're family. They're part of the team. When we win, they win. When we're tired, they're tired. And I think sometimes we forget that they chose to be here. They chose to spend their days protecting us, and that's not just a job. That's a kind of love, and I want them to know that I see it. The chat erupted. Fans in the live comments were typing through tears. Translators were scrambling to keep up. Fan accounts were already screenshotting and preparing posts before he even finished the sentence. But Chan wasn't done. He went further, and this is the part that elevated the moment from touching to genuinely profound. He talked about hierarchy. He talked about how in Korean workplace culture, there's an unspoken but deeply felt distance between the talent and the staff. The idol is the product. The bodyguard is the packaging. And the industry, whether intentionally or not, reinforces that divide every single day through seating arrangements, meal hierarchies, how people are introduced, and whose comfort is prioritized when resources are limited. Chan acknowledged that divide openly on camera to hundreds of thousands of live viewers and then explicitly rejected it. He said that in Stray Kids' team, he's made it a point to make sure the bodyguards eat when the members eat. Not after. Not whatever's left over. At the same time, the same food, at the same table whenever possible. He mentioned that during long overseas schedules, he personally checks in with the security team to ask if they've rested enough, if the hotel accommodations are adequate, if there's anything they need that they might not feel comfortable asking for because of the professional power dynamic. That level of intentionality from a group leader is staggering. This isn't kindness as an afterthought. This is kindness as policy. This is a 20-something idol who has thought deeply enough about structural inequality within his own working environment to not only recognize it, but to actively build counter practices against it. He's not just being nice to his bodyguard in a spontaneous moment. He's systematically restructuring how his team operates so that the people who protect them never feel like they're less than. And what makes this even more significant is the platform on which he said it. Chan's Room reaches enormous audiences. By saying these things publicly, Chan wasn't just expressing private gratitude, he was normalizing a different standard of behavior for how idols should treat their staff. He was using his influence not to sell an album or promote a comeback, but to plant the idea in hundreds of thousands of young minds that the people who serve you are not beneath you, and that acknowledging their humanity isn't weakness. It's the most fundamental expression of leadership there is. The clip from that broadcast has been viewed tens of millions of times in various edits. It's been used in video essays about leadership in the entertainment industry. It's been referenced in fan discussions about why Stray Kids staff retention rate seems unusually high, why the same bodyguards, managers, and crew members keep showing up year after year, tour after tour, when industry turnover for idol support staff is notoriously brutal. And the answer, according to fans and insiders alike, is simple: people stay where they feel valued. People stay where the leader of the group goes on a live broadcast at midnight and calls them family, not because a PR team told him to, but because he genuinely believes it. That's Bang Chan. That's the leader who spent 7 years learning how to wait, how to endure, how to watch other people get the spotlight, and came out the other side with an unshakable commitment to making sure nobody around him ever feels invisible. Still, if a late-night confession on a live broadcast moved your heart, get ready to feel something entirely different, because the member at number 3 didn't use words at all. And what he did in the pouring rain for his bodyguard might be the most visually unforgettable moment on this entire list. Number 3. Seungmin, the gentleman who shared his umbrella and his dignity in the pouring rain. Rain at an airport changes everything. Strip away the glamour, the designer outfits, the carefully curated idol image, when the sky opens up and water starts hammering down on a tarmac where a group of K-pop idols is being escorted from a terminal to a waiting van. The whole illusion of effortless celebrity dissolves in seconds. Hair gets ruined. Clothes get soaked. Expensive luggage gets waterlogged. Fans with cameras scramble for cover. And in the middle of all that chaos, the bodyguards are expected to do what they always do: keep the talent dry, keep the path clear, keep moving, keep everyone safe. Except now they're doing it while being drenched themselves because there are never enough umbrellas. And even when there are, the protocol is clear. The idol gets covered first. The bodyguard gets whatever's left, which is usually nothing. That's the unspoken contract. That's how it works in every entertainment industry, in every country, in every downpour. The person being protected stays dry. The person doing the protecting gets wet. Nobody questions it. Nobody challenges it. Nobody even thinks about it until Kim Seungmin decided, on one rain-soaked afternoon, that he wasn't going to accept that equation anymore. Before we get into exactly what happened, you need to understand something about Seungmin that often gets overlooked in the Stray Kids fandom hierarchy. In a group filled with explosive personalities, the raw intensity of Changbin, the chaotic energy of Han, the theatrical magnetism of Hyunjin, the deep-voiced sunshine of Felix, Seungmin operates differently. He's measured. He's precise. He's the member that other members describe as having an almost old soul quality, a sense of propriety and consideration that feels like it belongs to someone much older. He's the one who bows the deepest at award shows, who thanks staff by name in behind-the-scenes content, who corrects his own posture mid-conversation because he was raised to believe that how you carry yourself reflects how much you respect the space you're in and the people you're sharing it with. In fan communities, they call him the gentleman of Stray Kids, and it's not an exaggeration. It's a documented behavioral pattern that shows up consistently across years of content, schedules, and unscripted moments. So when rain started falling during an airport departure, heavy, relentless, the kind of monsoon-adjacent downpour that Southeast Asian and East Asian summers specialize in, and the Stray Kids team was making their way across an exposed section of tarmac toward their transport vehicle, the scene was set for exactly the kind of moment that separates someone who's been taught manners from someone who's internalized them. The staff had umbrellas. Not enough for everyone, there never are, but enough for the members. Each idol was paired with a staff member or bodyguard holding an umbrella overhead, shielding them from the rain as they walked. Standard procedure. Everyone stays in formation, everyone moves quickly, everyone gets to the van as fast as possible. But here's what the fan cams captured, and what multiple fan witnesses corroborated from different vantage points. Seungmin, who was walking under an umbrella held by his assigned bodyguard, noticed something that apparently nobody else in the formation was paying attention to, or if they noticed, they accepted it as normal. The bodyguard holding Seungmin's umbrella was completely exposed on one side. The umbrella was angled entirely over Seungmin, which meant the bodyguard's right shoulder, arm, and half his back were fully in the rain. Water was streaming down the guard's jacket. His hair was already plastered to his forehead. And he clearly had no intention of adjusting the angle because his job was to keep Seungmin dry, not himself. That's what he was trained to do. That's what he was being paid to do. And by every professional standard in the industry, he was doing it correctly. Seungmin stopped walking. Not dramatically, not with a grand gesture. He simply slowed his pace enough to break the rhythm of the formation, reached up, and took the umbrella handle from the bodyguard's hand. The bodyguard resisted for a moment. You can see it in the footage, that brief tug, that instinctive response of, no, this is my job, you're not supposed to do this, but Seungmin held firm. And then, instead of just taking the umbrella for himself, he repositioned it. He held it higher, wider, angled it so that both of them were covered. He adjusted his own position, moving closer to the bodyguard so that neither of them was getting rained on. He shortened his stride to match the bodyguard's pace. And they walked the remaining distance to the van like that side by side, sharing an umbrella, an idol and his protector occupying the same dry space as equals. The bodyguard's face in that moment is what destroyed people when the fancam circulated online. You could see the confusion first. This wasn't supposed to happen. This breaks protocol. This isn't how the hierarchy works. Then the confusion gave way to something else, something softer, something that looked a lot like the face a person makes when they realize they're being treated with a kind of respect they didn't know they were missing until someone offered it. He didn't smile, not outwardly, not in the way Felix's bodyguard did. But his posture changed. His shoulders, which had been squared and rigid in professional readiness, relaxed slightly. His chin, which had been set in that classic security detail forward position, dipped just a fraction. It was as if his body was acknowledging what his training wouldn't let his face express, that someone had just seen him as a person standing in the rain, not as a human umbrella stand. And here's the layer that makes this moment cut even deeper than the surface-level sweetness. What Seungmin did wasn't just kind, it was a quiet act of social rebellion. In Korean culture, hierarchical structures aren't suggestions. They're woven into the language itself, different verb endings, different vocabulary, different physical behaviors depending on where you sit in the social order. An idol taking the umbrella from a bodyguard and sharing it equally isn't just a nice thing to do. It's a statement. It says, the structure that puts me above you in this moment is something I'm choosing not to participate in right now. It says, getting to the van dry isn't more important than your dignity. It says, I'd rather we both be slightly damp than have you be completely soaked while I stay perfectly dry 3 inches away from you. The fan reaction was immense, but notably different from the responses to other moments on this list. Where Felix's snack moment inspired warmth and Lino's strap adjustment inspired admiration, Seungmin's umbrella moment inspired something closer to moral reflection. Fans didn't just say, that's sweet, they started asking themselves uncomfortable questions. How many times have we walked past someone getting rained on and not offered to share? How many times have we benefited from someone else's discomfort and called it normal because that's their job? How many unspoken hierarchies do we participate in every day without questioning whether the person below us in that hierarchy deserves the same basic dignity we take for granted? Seungmin didn't ask those questions out loud. He answered them with an umbrella. He answered them by stopping in the rain, taking the handle and repositioning the coverage so that the man protecting him from the world was also protected from the weather. No words. No speech. No live broadcast declaration of values. Just a quiet, rain-soaked act of equality between two people who the industry says shouldn't be equal, performed by a young man whose gentlemanship isn't a persona, it's a principle. The footage has been set to music, narrated in fan videos, analyzed in threads about idol character, and cited in discussions about what it actually means when fans say their favorite idol is a good person. Because being a good person isn't about grand declarations from studio chairs. It's about what you do when it's raining and someone next to you is getting wet, and you have the power to change that and you choose, without hesitation, without performance, without expectation of applause, to change it. That's Seungmin. That's the gentleman. That's why that umbrella moment will outlast every comeback, every chart position, every trophy they ever win. But if you think sharing an umbrella is the most powerful physical act of bodyguard appreciation on this list, you haven't heard what the member at number 2 did, and honestly, I'm not sure you're emotionally prepared for it. Because it happened at a moment when no one expected tenderness, and it hit harder than anything captured on camera that entire year. Number 2. Han. The anxious soul who became his bodyguard's comfort when nobody was watching. Here's something most people don't fully appreciate about Han Jae-sung until they really sit with it. This is a person who has spoken publicly, repeatedly, and with startling honesty about living with anxiety. Not the casual, internet culture version of anxiety where someone says, "Oh my God, that gives me anxiety," about a slightly crooked picture frame. Real anxiety. The kind that tightens your chest in crowded spaces. The kind that makes airports, those exact chaotic, overstimulating, unpredictable environments that K-pop idols navigate constantly, feel like walking through a minefield of triggers. The kind that once led him to step away from Stray Kids activities entirely because his mental health demanded a pause that no amount of professional obligation could override. Han has never hidden this. In an industry that historically rewards emotional suppression, where male idols in particular are expected to project invincibility at all times, Han Ji-sung chose vulnerability. He chose to say, on camera, to millions of people, I struggle. I get scared. Sometimes the world feels like too much. And the remarkable thing isn't just that he said it, it's that he kept going. He came back. He performs on stages in front of tens of thousands of people, despite the fact that every one of those environments contains the exact stimuli his anxiety feeds on. That context is absolutely essential to understanding why what he did for his bodyguard carries a weight that goes beyond mere kindness into something that borders on profound. The moment didn't happen at an airport. It didn't happen at a fan sign or during a concert. It happened backstage, in that liminal, unglamorous space behind the curtain where the real emotional machinery of being an idol operates without filters, without cameras, without the knowledge that anyone is watching. Except someone was watching. A staff member's behind-the-scenes camera, the kind used for internal documentation and occasionally for making of content, captured footage that was never officially released, but was partially visible in a background shot of a separate behind-the-scenes video that eagle-eyed fans isolated, enhanced, and analyzed frame by frame. And what that footage showed was Han Ji-sung, minutes before a major performance, a time when every idol is typically locked into their own headspace, running through choreography mentally, managing pre-show adrenaline, or sitting silently with earphones in. Doing none of that. Instead, he was sitting next to one of the team's bodyguards on an equipment case backstage. Just sitting. Not performing. Not being an idol. Not being Han of Stray Kids. Just being Ji-sung, a 20-something human being, sitting beside another human being who, from the body language visible in the footage, was clearly having a difficult moment. The bodyguard's posture was the giveaway. Anyone who's ever worked in high-stress security knows the posture. Shoulders drawn in, head slightly lowered, hands clasped too tightly, the physical signature of someone fighting an internal battle while trying desperately to maintain external composure. Whether it was exhaustion, personal stress, a bad phone call, or the accumulated weight of months of relentless scheduling, the cause wasn't visible. But the effect was. This man, whose entire professional identity was built on being unshakable, was shaking. Not literally, not dramatically, but in the small ways that only someone intimately familiar with what internal struggle looks like would recognize. And Han Ji-sung, who knows exactly what internal struggle looks like because he lives with it, recognized it immediately. What happened next unfolded slowly, quietly, with none of the dramatic urgency that makes for easy viral content. Han didn't rush over. He didn't make a scene. He sat down next to the bodyguard the way you sit down next to a friend who you know doesn't want to be asked, "Are you okay?" because the question itself might break whatever thin wall they've built to get through the next hour. He just sat there. Present. Close. Quiet. And then, after what fans estimate was about a minute of just sharing space in silence, a minute that in the enhanced footage feels like an entire short film about the power of simply being there. Han did something so small and so enormous at the same time that it's difficult to describe without underselling it. He reached over and gently patted the bodyguard's back. Not a quick, performative pat, the kind you give someone at a company dinner when you're pretending to be friendlier than you are. This was slow, deliberate, sustained. The kind of pat that says, "I'm not going to ask you what's wrong because I know sometimes you can't say it. But I'm here. I feel it. And you don't have to carry it alone right now." The bodyguard's reaction is what made fans across the internet collectively come undone. He didn't look up. He didn't say anything. But his shoulders, those drawn in, tight, battle-ready shoulders, dropped. Just dropped. The tension left his body in a visible wave, as if the simple act of someone sitting beside him and touching his back with genuine care had given his nervous system permission to stand down for 30 seconds. Permission to not be the protector. Permission to not be the strong one. Permission to be a person who's having a hard day and doesn't have to pretend otherwise because a kid who's technically his client just showed up and said, without a single word, "I've got you right now." The profound irony of this moment is what elevates it beyond every other entry on this list so far. Han Ji-sung, a person who has openly struggled with anxiety, who has needed support, who has been the one sitting on the equipment case with drawn-in shoulders more times than the public will ever know, became the supporter. The person who needs comfort became the person giving it. The person who fights his own internal battles every day looked at someone else fighting theirs and thought, I know what that feels like, and I'm not going to walk past it. That's not kindness. That's not even empathy in the conventional sense. That's something rarer and more valuable. It's solidarity. It's one struggling human being recognizing another struggling human being and choosing connection over isolation, choosing presence over protocol, choosing to be late to his own mental preparation for a performance because someone nearby needed what he himself has needed so many times before. The simple, irreplaceable reassurance that another person sees your pain and doesn't look away. Fan psychologists, and yes, that's a real subset of the K-pop analysis community, have written extensively about why this moment resonates so differently from standard idol staff interactions. The consensus is that most acts of idol kindness towards staff, no matter how genuine, operate within a power dynamic that's impossible to fully erase. The idol has the status. The idol has the platform. The idol extends kindness downward, and no matter how sincere it is, there's an inherent asymmetry. But Han's moment backstage dismantled that asymmetry entirely. In that moment, there was no idol and no bodyguard. There was no one with status comforting someone without it. There were two people sitting side by side on an equipment case, both carrying invisible weight, and one of them deciding to reach over and acknowledge the other's burden with nothing but a hand on a back and the willingness to sit in someone else's darkness without trying to fix it or flee from it. That's what makes Han Ji-sung dangerous in the best possible way. He's not dangerous because of his rap delivery or his lyrical intensity or his unpredictable variety show energy. He's dangerous because he has the emotional courage to be soft in an industry that rewards hardness, to be present in spaces that encourage avoidance, and to offer his own scarred, imperfect, anxiety-ridden compassion to someone who the world says doesn't need compassion because his job title is bodyguard and bodyguards aren't supposed to break. Han saw the break. Han sat with the break. Han patted the back that was breaking and said, in silence, I break too. And that's okay. If that moment hasn't already cracked something open inside you, take a deep breath, because number one isn't just a moment. It's a full scene that rewrote what fans thought they knew about the youngest member of Stray Kids, and what it revealed about his character is something that will stay with you long after this list is over. Number 1 I.N, the youngest who bowed deeper than anyone and made a grown bodyguard cry. Every group has a magne, the youngest member, the baby of the team, the one who gets teased the most, protected the most, and, in the eyes of both fans and fellow members, is expected to be the one who receives care rather than the one who gives it. That's the unwritten contract of being the youngest in a K-pop group. You get carried. You get babied. You get your cheeks pinched on variety shows and your mistakes forgiven a little faster because you're still growing, still learning, still becoming. Young Hyunjin, known to the world as I.N, the magne of Stray Kids, has spent his entire career quietly, persistently, and sometimes stubbornly defying that contract. He has never been comfortable being only the one who receives. From the earliest days of Stray Kids' formation, even during the survival show when he was barely past his mid-teens and surrounded by older, more experienced trainees, Hyunjin carried himself with a steadiness that felt almost anachronistic. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't make declarations about being mature or demand to be treated as an equal. He simply acted with a level of consideration and emotional awareness that made people forget he was the youngest in the room. Until he did something so unexpectedly profound that it forced everyone to remember his age and reckon with the fact that a teenager was teaching grown adults how to treat other human beings. And that's exactly what happened during the moment that sits at the very top of this list. The moment that, years later, fans still can't discuss without getting emotional. The moment that made a professional bodyguard, a man trained to suppress emotion, to be a fortress of composure under any circumstance, break down in tears because of something a kid did. Not a grand gesture. Not an expensive gift. Not a viral speech. Something far more powerful than any of that. Here's the full story, and every detail matters. It was the final date of a concert tour leg, the kind of night that carries a specific emotional charge for everyone involved. Final shows are different from every other date on a tour. The adrenaline is laced with melancholy. The screams from the crowd hit differently because everyone in that building knows this is the last time for a while. Members perform harder, sing louder, hold the ending poses longer, because there's a subconscious desire to make the last impression the deepest one. And when the lights go down for the final time and the members walk off stage and the crowd noise fades into that strange, hollow silence of a venue that was alive seconds ago and is now just a building again, that's when the emotions hit. Backstage after a final show is a specific kind of chaos. It's hugs and tears and laughter and exhaustion colliding in a space that smells like sweat and hairspray and adrenaline. Staff members who've maintained their professionalism for months suddenly allow themselves to feel the weight of what they've been part of. Managers who've been running on logistics and caffeine sit down and stare at nothing for a moment. Stylists quietly pack up their kits with a tenderness that suggests they're packing up more than fabric and brushes. And the bodyguards, those immovable, expressionless sentinels who've spent every single show standing in the wings, scanning exits, monitoring crowds, absorbing the secondhand electricity of a concert without ever being part of it, stand at their posts. Because even when the show is over, their job technically isn't. The members were doing their post-show routine. High-fiving staff. Group hugs. The emotional decompression that happens when 8 people who just poured everything they had into a 2-hour performance finally have permission to stop performing. Most of the members were clustered together, laughing through tears, doing the things you'd expect from young men coming down from an emotional and physical peak. But I.N separated from the group. Fans who've pieced together this moment from multiple staff-taken photos, partial behind-the-scenes footage, and first-hand accounts from people who were backstage describe what happened next with a consistency that leaves no room for doubt. Hyunjin walked, not ran, not bounced, not moved with the energetic bounciness that magnates are stereotypically associated with, walked, deliberately and calmly, toward the bodyguard who had been assigned to him throughout the tour. This wasn't a random security guard. This was the man who had been Hyunjin's shadow for weeks, possibly months. The one who walked beside him through every airport. The one who stood outside his dressing room. The one who positioned himself between Hyunjin and any perceived threat with a reliability so absolute that it became invisible, the way gravity is invisible until you think about what would happen without it. Hyunjin stopped in front of this man. And then the magne of Stray Kids, the youngest member, the baby of the group, did something that shattered every expectation of what a young idol does backstage after a final concert. He bowed. Not a casual nod. Not the quick, perfunctory bow that idols give as a general courtesy when passing staff in hallways. I.N performed a full, deep, 90-degree bow, the kind reserved in Korean culture for moments of profound respect and sincere gratitude. The kind you give to a teacher who changed your life. The kind you give to a parent. The kind that says, with your entire body folded in half and your eyes toward the ground, what you have done for me is so significant that words are insufficient. And the only way I can express what I feel is to make myself physically lower than you, because you deserve to be elevated. He held the bow. Not for a second. Not for the quick dip and rise that satisfies social obligation. Witnesses describe him holding it for what felt like an uncomfortably long time, long enough that the bodyguard, who initially responded with the standard slight bow of acknowledgement, realized this wasn't a formality. This was something else entirely. So here we are. 7 moments. 7 members. 7 instances where the invisible wall between idol and bodyguard, between talent and staff, between the protected and the protector, was deliberately and beautifully demolished by a group of young men who apparently never got the memo that hierarchies are supposed to be permanent. But zoom out from the individual moments and a bigger picture emerges, one that says something not just about Stray Kids, but about what it means to be genuinely good in an industry that doesn't always reward goodness. Lino at number 7 showed us that awareness is the first step. You can't care for someone if you don't notice them. Hyunjin at number 6 proved that empathy isn't passive, it's a reflexive action, catching someone before they even know they're falling. Felix at number 5 reminded us that joy is inclusive, that the people standing at the edges of happiness deserve to be pulled into it, even if it's just with a snack offered in 2 hands. Bang Chan at number 4 demonstrated that leadership isn't about authority, it's about building systems of care that outlast any single gesture. Seungmin at number 3 taught us that dignity is non-negotiable, that no professional title should determine whether you stand in the rain. Han at number 2 revealed the most radical form of compassion, the kind that comes from someone who knows brokenness intimately and chooses to sit with someone else's instead of retreating into their own. And I.N at number 1 gave us the ultimate lesson, that gratitude, when it's real, doesn't care about hierarchy, age, or status. It bows. It speaks. It writes letters by hand. It makes grown men cry because it does the one thing that every human being on this planet is starving for. It says, I see you. 7 moments. One undeniable truth, Stray Kids doesn't just perform on stage. They perform humanity off it. And maybe that's why their bodyguards don't just protect them out of obligation. Maybe they protect them because, somewhere along the way, these 8 guys made it clear that protection in their world isn't a one-way street. It's mutual. It's reciprocal. It's family. And that's not something you can fake, manufacture, or train into existence. That's character. Pure, consistent, rain-soaked, snack sharing, letter writing, umbrella holding, back patting, strap adjusting, live stream confessing character. That's Stray Kids. Thanks for watching. If this list moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness isn't a weakness. It's the most powerful thing a person can carry. See you on the next one.